In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Before I get into this review, I would like to give a quick thank you to Ross from Random Horror. He shouted me out in his most recent video for the horrors that time forgot for the 2000s, and he highly recommended my channel at the end of that video. Thank you, Ross. You have a great channel as well. And thank you to everyone who came to my past two live streams. I did one on Sunday for the after party of the Halloween Hootenanny, and I did one on Thursday just because I felt like it, and I really enjoyed those, and I thank everyone who came to those. Today I'm going to be reviewing a movie called Box, and this is a short horror film that seems to have been shown at festivals and things in 2018, but it was uploaded to the Kings of Horror channel in 2019. This is an interesting one because this is not a feature film. This is a short horror film. It's about 30 minutes long. I was asked to review this movie by James Dempster, or Jimmy Dempster, who is the star of this film. I connected with him on social media through the Slasher Horror app. He just sent me a link to the movie and was like, hey, please tell me what you think. And after I watched it and I liked it and I left a comment on it, he was like, hey, can you do a review on the channel? I would really appreciate that. This is probably the first time a filmmaker has actually reached out to me and asked me to review something for them. So yeah, this is kind of a unique thing for me, and I appreciate him. I'm going to link his channel below and maybe some of his other social media links as well, and I'm just going to link Kings of Horror as well because they upload a lot of short horror films as well as feature-length horror films, more sort of indie productions. They're really nice people too. I've connected with them on Facebook and stuff, and they were really nice. They even post some of their art on their Facebook channel when I was just starting YouTube, and yeah, just really nice people. Without further ado, here's my review of Box. So this film is about an unnamed man played by James Dempster. He is driving away from you don't really know where. He's just in his car. He gets into a fight with someone who's driving the car. You don't really know why he's in the car or who's driving or what's happening, but he gets in a fight with this guy and barely escapes with his life and ends up back at his house where he finds this huge old trunk or box that seems to really unnerve him for some reason. And throughout the film, we learn why this box unnerves him so much. We gradually start to piece together what the box is, what it does, what this guy's actual past was, and that's basically the movie. It's just this creepy old box that comes to confront this guy, and the audience has to kind of draw their own conclusions about what's really going on in the film. The music in this movie is pretty good. It utilizes some actual film score that was written for the movie, which is good. It wasn't particularly standout or unique in my eyes, but it served its purpose in the film. It punctuated scenes where it needed to be punctuated, but the film also used specific pieces by classical composers like Handel and Vivaldi, particular pieces that I enjoyed anyway. The Handel piece that they use in particular is kind of used as the theme for Box. The Vivaldi piece is used to punctuate this more sort of intense, frantic scene. It's not really that fast-paced or frantic, but the Vivaldi piece is much more fast, and it kind of shows the character's kind of internal frenzy in that moment in a way that I like, and I just like that piece anyway. And the Handel piece is much slower and much more melancholy, but also very grandiose, and the use of both pieces adds this sense that this is a lot bigger than it is. It gives this much more, this sense of grandeur to this whole story, which is a very personal introverted story, but it sort of puts you inside the character's head and makes this as big of a deal as it is to him, and it kind of shows his sadness as well. It was a really good way of using both of those pieces to kind of convey the feelings of that character. By contrast, the sound design of this movie was honestly my least favorite part of it. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever heard. It didn't feel like the sound design for, say, Killjoy, where you can tell that the people who were working on that film just picked a bunch of really conventional stock sound effects that you hear everywhere, and it's just like so ridiculous that it's kind of funny, but honestly not that funny. With this, there were some moments where the sound design felt really eerie and really good, but there were other moments where the sound effects just felt kind of dull and stocky and didn't really feel like they fit with what was on screen. The sound design didn't really gel with the atmosphere of the movie. It just felt like it was kind of sitting on top of everything. It didn't feel like a part of this environment that they had created, and it kind of took me out of the movie. Story-wise, this movie is very ambiguous, but I overall liked it. It could have used a tiny bit more exposition as to what was going on, but at the same time it kind of lets you draw your own conclusions as to what's happening, which is fun. Or I probably shouldn't say fun, because this movie is really friggin' depressing, but it's kind of cool to fill in the blanks as to what actually happened in your head. But I think a little bit more exposition as to who this guy is, what his relationship is to the few other characters that we see in the film, and just a few other little tidbits like that would add a lot more weight to the horror that we see in the film, and it would help us understand his pain a little bit more, and it would just add a little bit more meat to the story and really help you feel for the character when he's in these really emotional states, because you're like, oh my god, he did something horrible, or this traumatic experience happened to him, but we don't quite know the gist of what it is. I like things being left to the imagination, but I feel like just a little too much was left. It's not as bad as I'd say when I reviewed Occupied. I liked the overall atmosphere and sort of ethereal, creepy vibe that that movie had. It was sort of a slow burn, atmospheric, psychological thing, but they really told us nothing. They gave us the tiniest bit of exposition that was really not substantial in any way. It just led to more questions, and we never knew what the character really was or why they were having these disturbed freakouts in the film. They just kind of happened, and they were bleak, but it just didn't work because you were just kind of like, huh? This movie gives you actually a lot more to go on than Occupied did. I feel like it just needed a little bit more, just a little bit more story as to who this guy is, what his relationship with these few people was. It would just help us understand his pain a little bit more, and it would help the horrific and sad parts of the movie have just that much more of a punch to them. But the way it does make the viewer sort of piece together what happens and fill in the blanks was pretty good overall. It was a well done sort of ambiguous, creepy, slow burn film in that way, and I liked that. In contrast to that, and in spite of that, I wasn't crazy about the voiceover in the film. I think it was James Dempster again, sort of his internal monologue, and it was just kind of him thinking to himself. It gives us a lot more exposition rather than just kind of watching him sit there and trying to read what he's thinking from his facial expressions, but it feels like a little bit too much. It feels like they're kind of spoon-feeding you what he's thinking at the time in some ways, but at the same time we're seeing this all through his head, and it is supposed to be you seeing kind of what his perspective is. You're seeing flashbacks from his past, you're seeing things through his eyes, so you would probably hear his internal monologue too. It felt a little forced, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. I'm really not sure how I feel about that element. I'd be interested to see what other people think. I liked the ambiguity, and I kind of piece together that this box that appears in this guy's house is a specific representation of a very specific kind of guilt that he's feeling, and it's not perfectly conveyed, but it gives you enough clues to kind of piece it together for yourself in a way that is pretty well done. There are some scenes in the movie that are played for suspense. One scene in particular where something is happening with the box. James Dempster's character is huddled over in this corner in the doorway while it's kind of stuck on him, and it'll pan back to see what's happening with the box. It builds up a lot of suspense, but it doesn't really have much of a payoff. It feels like they're trying to build to some kind of jump scare or eerie, imposing evil thing coming towards him, but nothing ever really happens with that. It kind of lingers on that for a while, and then you're just kind of like, okay, we get it. This is supposed to be suspenseful. Something should happen now. And then nothing really happens with that. There are things happening, but they're not really threatening him. It just felt like it was trying to build to something that wasn't there or set up to begin with. It just felt like they were trying to do this sort of suspenseful close camera angle thing in a place where it wasn't really needed. If that was like one long shot where you just saw him huddled in the corner and what was going on with the box, I would enjoy that a lot more. I think that would be a lot creepier. But again, it wasn't bad, it just felt unnecessary. And there are a lot of eerie flashback sequences that were a highlight of the film for me. They're in black and white. They show a good chunk of what this character's past was, what he was doing, and the really horrific, tragic parts of the film. And it is a standout part of the movie for me. I like beautiful, shadowy black and white photography anyway, and this just felt like it was something very nostalgic and very sad for the character. Acting-wise, I can't really speak to the few other characters in the film that aren't James Dempster because they don't do a lot. They're just kind of there. A few of them are just in masks, so we don't really get to see them convey a lot of emotion. They're just kind of there for some more action-y stuff. There are a few children that he interacts with who don't even have dialogue. We just kind of see them. I'm sure they're all doing their jobs well in the film. There's just not a lot to go off of. It is basically just James Dempster all the time. It's basically just him. And he does a really good job conveying a lot with really little to go off of. He conveys, sadness, this kind of manic happiness, not happiness, but kind of this manic, gleeful madness in a few moments. This anger, this sadness, just a lot of different emotions that are pretty decently done with little to no dialogue even in the film, and basically nobody to play off of. And there is a scene near the end of the film with him talking to himself in a mirror that was a standout for me. I'll get more into what he actually does in that scene in my little spoiler section, but I really liked that scene. Makeup-wise, in these creepy flashbacks, we learn that he was a party clown at one point in time. I'm not going to go a lot into that, but he has this clown makeup that is very, very creepy in that it feels a little bit messy. It's starting to come off of his face a little bit. You can see a bit of his facial hair under it. It reminded me a little bit of Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, which was right around the same time, I'm sure, and not an intentional thing, but it reminded me of him in a very good way, in that it kind of made you take a step back and be a little bit unsettled by this character, but you were still seeing everything through his eyes, so you still kind of sympathized with him, but you felt a little bit more distanced and unsettled because of, I guess, just the creepy clown makeup instinctively. That is really all I have to say in terms of non-spoiler stuff. Thank you, James Dempster, for linking me to this, asking me to review it, and let me know what I thought of it. I thought you did a great job. I thought the filmmakers did a great job. It was not perfect. It felt a little bit too ambiguous, and I felt like it tried to do some things that didn't quite work. I wish the sound design was better, but it was overall, considering that it was a atmospheric slow burn horror film that only lasted 30 minutes and you don't even know the main character's name, it told a really engaging story, and I had, I don't want to say a good time because again it was really depressing, but I was engaged with trying to piece together what actually happened, and I felt it overall pretty satisfying. So I hope you and all the filmmakers here continue to do great things. To everyone else, again, this movie is not perfect, but I would love to see other people check it out and see what they think of it, because I think it is worth your while. It is a very melancholy, eerie, atmospheric film that leaves a lot to the imagination in a way that I think, all in all, works. So that is my spoiler-free review of Box. Here are the spoilers. So basically, what I gathered of James Dempster's character is that he was a party clown in the past, and he played at this party, and one of the kids at the party, my brain kind of assumed that it was his daughter, but we don't really know. He either accidentally runs her over with his car or deliberately kills her in some kind of moment of madness. He feels extremely guilty for it. He tells himself he's crazy, and this box comes back to haunt him, and he's forced to feed someone to it because there's something in the box that's devouring people, and there's this person at the beginning of the film who seems to have kidnapped him, and he attacks the person and kills that person, but because that person is an attempted murder, I think the box goes after that person as well and devours him. But as this character feels more and more guilty about what he did, he kind of sees himself as a murderer, so he feeds himself to the box as well. I thought that was kind of a good setup in explaining what it is that the box does. And I like the box even more. I think it really fits because we see the box earlier as essentially it's his party supplies box for when he's at this birthday party as the clown. And he's got these masks in it and these party favors and stuff. And one of the masks in the box is the mask that this guy at the beginning of the film was wearing. And again, it's fairly ambiguous, but he feels very guilty for having killed this person. We don't know if it was deliberate or an accident, but he feels horrible about it. And that leads up to that penultimate scene where it's him in the clown makeup arguing with himself in the mirror, and it is this very dual personality moment where it'll go back and forth between this guilty crying self and this angry self that is sort of going after him. And it feels like the scenes where Gollum talks to himself in Lord of the Rings, or I think other people might compare it to the Green Goblin talking to himself in Spider-Man. I have not seen that movie in forever, but I think it was the Soulless Trenchcoat that brought that scene up when I was comparing it to some other film, but it has that same vibe. It is this very sort of dual personality arguing scene that I thought was conveyed really well. There's a moment where he starts smashing his head against the mirror, and it's just a lot of different emotions all at once, and I thought it was really well done. I really liked that scene. And then he just feels awful, so he just kind of feeds himself to the box at the very end of the film. That's kind of why I say I don't quite know what it was getting at, because it didn't give us enough meat to really what his story was and what his relationship was with these characters and what exactly it was he did. But it gave me enough clues to piece together an idea in my head, and again, I appreciated engaging with the story, so I don't really have anything else to say, but I liked this movie. I didn't love this movie. It had just a few technical problems, and I wish the story was a little bit better explained, but overall I liked it. So once again, thank you to James Dempster for sending this to me and asking me to review it, and thank you to everybody else who watched my video, and hopefully I will see you in another video. Bye!